for me, there's not a lot between them. They've drawn 3-3 and they've lost 2 games, 2-1. The last 2 at Parkhead, and have gone down to 10 men. I don't see a gulf in the quality of football they play. I don't believe that there is a big difference between the two teams.
The fact is, at the moment, Graham, whenever they meet, Celtic win.
Football people will tell you that is not a team being miles in front of anyone else.
You don't get to define what people think because you kicked the bloody
Try and
football.
listen. I know you're in the game briefly.
10 years is a fair amount.
Let me explain to you how football people, professional football, would view this. Rangers are not a mile behind.
They go to Celtic Park on Saturday and they lose by 2 goals to 1. Were you disappointed watching it? I know there's a cup final involving the 2 Old Firm coming up, but what was your takeaway at the end of it?
Ultimately, disappointment. I felt they started, I didn't concede a goal after a couple of minutes this time, but weathered the early storm, which you always get at Parkhead, started to settle down into a chance. Fabio still had the best chance of the first half. A header where he got inside the full-back. How he's put it away from there, only he knows. I think the sending off was a sending off in a modern game. And then it was obviously a very difficult game for him after that.
What was Lundstrom thinking about? At a time like that, to do that, when he is much needed.
Listen, he's got a nanosecond to... He thinks he's favourite for it. The temptation was too great. Because he is... I think he's quite a good player, him. I think he does a good job. But he went to ground. You go to ground today, you risk everything. Whoever you're tackling will make a meal of it. And that's not being critical of that Celtic fullback. His name escapes me. But that's right throughout the game in every country you watch. The game played. So, yeah, very disappointing. Last 3 Old Firm games, for me, there's not a lot between them. Yeah, ultimately, and it's not a new thing. They've drawn 3-3. Miserable first half in that game, but fabulous in the second half. Came back from the dead. Got a 3-3. And they've lost 2 games, 2-1, the last 2 at Parkhead, and have gone down to 10 men. I don't believe that there is a big difference between the two teams, but ultimately, at the start of each season, you're going to win the league or lose the league by your Old Firm results. That's generally how it works out.
The fullback was Alistair Johnson.
That's how it generally works out.
There are those, Graham,
and can I just finish by saying...
positive gulf.
There's a gulf there. Yeah, they're ahead of Rangers. How do you expect me to answer this question? But I'm trying to give you some facts to back up my thinking.
Right, you're saying there's not a lot between the two sides.
There is not a lot. For me, they have better strikers. I don't see a gulf in the quality of football they play. I think they're better goal getters, which ultimately does decide games. I look at if we go and win next week at Hampden Park, there's 3 trophies to win at Scotland. They would win 2 out of the 3. But of course, the most important one is the league. That says more about you.
And Celtic are on course for their 12th title in 13 seasons.
Yes, that hurts. Of course, that hurts. But I'd also like to tell you that, the new manager, I think, has done a fabulous job. He has been there for 6 months, whatever it is. He signed 3 players, 2 on loan. He spent 4.3 million on Diamondi. He spent 4 million quid to change things. I'm hoping this window, the club somehow find a Josh to support him and he can get some of the players in that he knows and trusts, and it will make the difference in the league next year. But I would not be critical of the manager. I wouldn't be critical of the players right now. I think he's getting a tune out of those players. They've slipped up badly at Ross County, slipped up badly at Dundee, and that's why it all came down to Saturday's game that they lost.
But that's when he needed to get a tune out of them. At Ross County.
I wouldn't, Jim, you can ask me any guys you want. I will not be critical of the manager because I think he's done a good job.
Well,
and it could still end up with 2 trophies.
I'm not criticising him, but I mean, Rangers fans...
No, you wanted me to criticise him, and I won't.
I think Rangers fans have got their heads in their hands at the moment, Graham, even though there's a cup final coming up. Celtic on course for their 12th title in 13 seasons.
Hurts.
This is an unrecognisable Rangers.
Jim, I've answered the question. I won't go
lost against Dundee.
The thing is, Simon, you look at it, and you've been up there with me. How do Rangers change this recurring storyline?
Well, a lot of that 12 years, Rangers weren't actually around to compete with Celtic because of what they did in their own past. But Graham contradicts himself because we had this debate 2 or 3 weeks ago about Rangers and Celtic, and seemingly in that conversation, in that argument, it wasn't really important to see the Old Firm games come out and the results of those Old Firm games don't determine the league. Now, if you don't beat the Old Firm games, which is what I said 3 weeks ago, you don't win those games.
I've always said that. When did I say that?
In the last conversation we had, I made the argument about...
No, you're getting mixed up again.
No, I'm not.
I'll tell you what I said, and you weren't listening.
I was.
At my very first press conference, I was asked about the Old Firm game, how much you have to win them.
I'm not talking about
I
that.
said,
I'm talking about what we said
and this
last
is what
week,
you're
2
mistaken.
weeks ago.
I said, at the Old Firm games, I don't care. This is my first press conference. I don't care if we lose them all as long as we win the league. And I quickly realised that wasn't the case.
Yeah. What I
So,
said in the conversation
that's what I
last
said in
week,
my very first press
What I
conference.
said in the conversation the last time we discussed the Old Firm was, if you don't get outcomes against the Old Firm team, surely you can't win the league. And you presented a different argument.
Well, you need to somehow dig out that tape, because that is totally against my
I
thinking.
can quite easily do it.
We'll do it.
Well, I can if you
We'll
want me
do
to.
it.
Look, we'll do it in a second. But the point is that you look at Rangers and Celtic. First of all, Celtic are going to win the league by being the best of a bad bunch. Neither of these sides are outstanding. Neither of these sides. I would look at once upon a time the argument that Celtic and Rangers coming down to English football would make a splash in English football. They wouldn't. They would struggle in the Championship, these two sides right now. I think they're both poor sides. And I think the fact that, we're talking about spending £4 million on players, the only team you've got to beat in that league to be able to really be significant is Celtic, and Rangers haven't been able to do it. They've taken 1 point out of 12. And you have to look at Philippe Clement, who I've been a great admirer of. But when it comes to the business end of the season, if this was on the other foot, and this was a new Celtic manager, and Celtic had the league in their hands with a game in hand, and they go and get done by Ross County and Dundee and don't take a point off the opposition, he would have something to say about the Celtic manager.
I think
Because
it's
it's
fair to
Rangers
say
manager
this
won.
is not Clement's team. That's what I
But
would
it was
say.
his team
It's
when
not-
everything was okay.
It's not his team. He would
Yeah,
not.
but
He would not.
but that's always
Prior
the
to the
argument
prior
when
to
people are
this
being held
prior to
accountable.
this game, prior to the previous Celtic game at home with the 3-3, he would have still been saying to himself, "I need to strengthen there. I'm not happy with him. He's not good enough." That doesn't change
but that's the
because you
nature
get
of
a
the
good
beast.
result or a bad
But that's
result.
the
But
nature
you
of
agree
He
with
will-
Simon Graham that neither side is particularly good at the moment.
Well, I think there's a factor for that. I think there's a very simple reason for that. Rangers got £3 million quid. I think I'm correct in saying £3 million from television last year. And Bournemouth got over 100 million. Bournemouth.
But when they
Where I
do
live.
meet, Celtic win.
Where I live.
Celtic have won
I'm
3
answering
and
one
drawn
question
1.
at a time. He asked me, is Simon correct in saying the standard's not great? That is a fact.
But with
it's
re-
not. It's not.
But with respect,
we would
Graham,
all want it to be.
But with respect, Graham, Rangers and Celtic's turnover, granted, compared to... Hang on, I haven't finished.
But it's-
Compared to,
it's-
hang on, I haven't
it's
finished,
stating
Graham.
bleeding
I haven't
obvious.
finished yet. And insofar as comparing it to Bournemouth and the 110 million quid they get, but when you put Rangers and Celtic, they get 80-90 million pounds turnover against the Benelux teams in the Champions League. They still come up short, and their turnovers aren't bigger, and their revenues aren't bigger.
What do you mean they come up short? Rangers got to have a European final last year.
But in when I'm talking about in the recent times, in the last,
How
in the
recent
last
is
couple of
a year
years.
ago?
Yeah,
How
no,
recent is
18
a year
months,
ago?
2 years ago. 2 years ago.
How recent are we talking about? Last
2 years
week?
ago. What we're talking about now.
Yeah, you're talking about Celtic in the Champions League where they're in against the
we
very
live in the times
best.
of now, right? And I'm talking about Rangers. I'm not actually focusing particularly on Rangers. I'm focusing on both of them.
No, I think
because
you're referring more to Celtic.
I'm looking at both of them and saying both of those sides. Celtic's winning of the league, which is a validation of Brendan Rodgers, is primarily because they're the better of the bad bunch. And I'm disappointed by both of them. And your point is, of course, absolutely correct. But I'm now saying I look at these two sides, and it will probably be picked up by the Daily Record, as not even being that competitive that they'd compete that highly in the Championship. And then now tell me that the comparisons would be different there, because the turnovers would be similar.
Well, I think if they were, I can't see it happening, but if they were down here, say they started in the Championship, it will be a matter of time before they got out of that. And then we started to get, then you start to get the kind of money that's thrown around down here.
But it's not going to happen.
Agreed.
It won't happen.
It's not
gonna happen.
In a very short period of time, they'll both be challenging.
And the fact is, Celtic are on course for their 12th title in 13 seasons. And there's a Rangers fan, one of a few getting in touch. Nicky's a big Rangers fan. The squad needs a clear out. And the manager is looking a little bit like he's struggling just now. He needs to win the cup final or he will be under pressure, says Nicky, a Rangers
And if he
fan.
wins the cup final, everything for that weekend, everything will be rosy in the garden again.
For that weekend.
But the bigger picture is, and I've said this to you many times, winning the league means you're the best team in that country. Winning cups, you can be lucky and win a cup. You know, the best team in Europe right now are Man City, but they're not going to win the European Cup.
What happens if they don't win it? Is Clement under pressure going into next season?
You're always under pressure. You're only ever one game away from
but
being under
specifically
pressure.
him.
No, I come back to it's not his team. And I think the time to judge him would be a year from now if he gets that far, and I hope he does, because I think he's doing a good job there. If he can get a decent window with decent, better players than he's got, I've said to you already, I don't believe they're that far apart. They dropped. I come back to it. If you win the league, it means you're the best team that year.
By comparison of Rangers and Celtic, Rangers took one. Put everything
Yeah,
aside, they
and-
took 1 point off Celtic.
I know, so they deserve-
Celtic are miles away from them.
But 6 points would suggest
But that's
it's
different.
not.
That's the league. But we're talking about the comparison between the two sides. They'll all beat and
Well,
lose games
that's what we're
in the
talking
league.
about. We're talking about the winning of the
But
league.
comparison
Do you
between
think
Celtic
you and Celtic
Six-
are miles ahead of
But
Rangers?
6 points.
I do, yes.
Well,
And I think Simon's hit the nail on the head there again, that we've taken 10 points from a possible 12 against Rangers.
everyone can say that, Ewan. Everyone can point at the end of the season if we'd won this and won that and not lost that one.
Yeah, I know.
But
you
you
are-
not concede, though. These games were the crucial ones because Celtic have won 3 and
You are-
drawn 1 so
you-
far.
They have won the league, which means they are the best team in Scotland this year.
But crucially, though, when the Old Firm meet, it's Celtic
Yeah,
who come
right
out on
now,
top.
I come back to it. This guy has spent £4 million in building his squad. This is not Clement's team. I would judge him a year from now if he's got 2 windows and he gets support from the board. Then we
That's
talk about a different.
argument, Graham, but right now,
but
as
right
we can-
now,
but your argument
we're
is
going early
twofold.
on him.
But no, we're not going on. But move Clement out of the argument and just talk about the difference between Celtic and Rangers. Because the only team you're comparing Celtic and Rangers to are Celtic and Rangers. You're not comparing them to Hearts or Kilmarnock, are you? Right. So the bottom line is, if you look at the argument between us, which is Rangers and Celtic, Celtic are in a different position and a far better side than Rangers. You say they're not that far apart, but they've taken 1 point off them.
Yeah,
And they might win the league by 6 points. They might win it by 9 points. But the point is the only comparison between Celtic and Rangers, not Celtic and Kilmarnock or Rangers and
all right,
Dundee.
forget the points. The last 3 games, I can't even remember what the first one was. But it's been 3-3, 2-1, 2-1, and the 2-2-1s were when Rangers went to 10 men. Is that suggesting they're miles apart? If it's not the 6 points you're gauging it by, then gauge it on the head-to-head. It's not like
let's ask Jason, who's a big Rangers
it's
fan.
not like a team that.
Miles ahead means that they're going for their 12th title in
No,
13
no, no, no,
seasons.
no. We're talking about this year. As Simon pointed out earlier, some of those years Rangers weren't even in the Premier League. So please tell me, both of you,
Yeah.
what criteria are you working with when you say Rangers are miles behind Celtic? This year.
You're saying they haven't been bashed up 5-1 in games, right? And you would
Well,
expect...
you don't just pass that off. That is a fact.
I'm about to give you an answer.
That's
Your
a
question.
fact.
They took 1 point out of 12. That, to me, defines it. Now, your argument would be, well, I'll nuance that.
Well, you haven't nuanced anything.
No, but
These
hang
are
on.
facts,
In
Simon.
the conversation we just had a moment ago,
Stay with us, John.
Rangers didn't get bashed up by Celtic in any of the games.
No.
Is your argument.
And they've lost the league by 6 points.
Right.
So would that suggest to anyone with the
But the only comparison...
remotest bit of
But
common
Graham,
sense, that is not an enormous margin.
We're not talking
That
about
would suggest that these two teams are not far away from
both
each other.
Celtic and Rangers are better than the rest of the dross that's in that league. So the only comparison is between Celtic and Rangers.
No,
Forget
it's
what's
not
happening.
the comparison.
It
It's
is,
not the
Graham.
only- You've
It
still
is.
got to be. So you're
The
suggesting every
comparison
other
is
game is
Celtic
just a
and
given.
Rangers.
They just win easily the other
No,
games.
yeah,
That is not the case.
I am, because look at
That
the
is
points
not the
total.
case.
Look
That
at
is
the points
not the
totals.
case.
Look at the points totals.
That is not the case.
And look at the reality. You're right to suggest, because Rangers only come back into the SPFL in 16-17, so we can't say 13 seasons. We can only say 8.
Right,
Eight
right.
seasons. Right.
Right.
So they won 1 title out of the last 8, which is a more fair analysis. But we have to define the result being they took 1 point out of 12. And how many points Celtic win the league is irrelevant.
John, don't wear your Celtic shirt when you give me this answer. But you've been good enough to come on, mate. How big is the gulf between Celtic and Rangers?
The minute I'd say Rangers will be about 4 or 5 years behind.
Behind, so Celtic will dominate the league for another 4 to 5 years.
Oh, hands down. And just another one. Graham said Rangers weren't in the Premier League when Celtic won the titles. Rangers claimed they won 56 titles. Does the first division, the championship, and the second division, do they not count now?
He wasn't going to